You probably clicked on this video because you want to learn about arrays or lists in Python. And that's exactly what I'm going to teach you about today. In this video, we're going to talk about what lists are, how we can create them, and how we can work with them. So, firstly, what even is a list? Well, the actual definition of a list is that it is a container that can hold multiple values. And I'm going to show you how we can do that, how we can put that in the process, how we can work with them. Pretty cool. One of the most fundamental topics and things in programming. And it's the first things that I learned when I started competitive programming. Very important for me. Should be for anyone. And we're going to learn about how we can create lists. Okay. So as you can see over here, it says that we can create lists with square brackets. And here's how we can do that. So one thing I have to mention is that when we create lists, we just create them with a variable, like any other value, like a float, an integer, whatever it is. We create them with a variable. But unlike in other languages, where it's called an array, a list is actually, you don't have to define what data type it holds, right? Could be any size, could have anything in it. So I could have a float and a list, a float and a list if I wanted multiple lists inside each other. I could have a float and an integer in the same list, doesn't matter. Works perfectly fine. Because I don't have to explicitly define what's going to be in my list. Okay? So yeah, we just create it with a variable, and I'll show you how. So I can name my variable anything, but for this case, I'm going to name it numbers. So, numbers is equal to this. Oh, that's a negative sign, right? So you can see over here, it says numbers is equal to empty square brackets. This is just an empty list, okay? But if you ever do want to have a specific length for a list, I'm going to show you how we can do that later in another video, because it's going to be important later on in programming. So yeah, this is how we create an empty list, is just with square brackets. Now, I'm going to show you how we can just directly put in items to our list. So in lists, we have to use comma separated values, which means that every value is separated by a comma. So in my numbers list, I can do 1, 2, 3, 4. But you see that they're all separated by spaces, right? That's because they're comma separated values. Oh, there. And I have to remember that I have to split these numbers or values with a comma in between them. Pretty simple. We're also going to learn about something called zero indexing. So zero indexing basically means that in lists or arrays, instead of starting at the number 1 for a position, like you see over here when we're counting by hand, we think of this as the first position. This is the second position, this is the third position, fourth position, so on and so forth, right? But when it comes to programming, we started this as a 0th position, right? So this is the 0 position, this is the first position, second position, and third position. And that's what zero indexing is. That's called zero indexing. It's pretty important. You have to remember it. You're going to get used to it anyways. So zero indexing is when instead of starting at 1, we start at 0. So we're going to talk about how we can add things to our list. So let's say I wanted to add 2 later on in my program. So over here you can see it says with dot append. What dot append does is that it just adds an item to the end of my list. So if you've ever looked at a stack, like a stack of papers, I can just take another piece of paper, write something on it, and I can put it on top of the stack. So we can assume the stack as our list, where when we do dot append on this list and we put something inside of it, it just goes at the end of the list, right? Pretty easy to understand. And I'm going to put an action over here. So I'm going to follow the same pattern where in my list over here, it just goes up by 1. So what comes after 4? 5, right? So I would do dot append, and inside these brackets, I would put my value. Now my value could be anything. Okay, my value could be 5 as a string. Could be anything I want it to be. I'll show you here. It could be this, and it shows up as a string. It could be normal integer, right? It could be just be 5. It could just be this, right? It could also be 5.0, right? Make sense? So yeah, I can put anything in these brackets, any value I want it to be. But I'm going to put 5 so that it follows our pattern over here. So this is how we add things to our list. Okay? Now we're going to learn about how to remove items in the list with .remove or .pop. So let's say that I didn't want 5, or I didn't want 4 anymore from my list. I didn't want 4 anymore in my list, so I can just remove 4. But there's 2 ways to do it. And there's different causes and use cases for both of them. First way is called .remove. Okay? .remove is useful when there's only one occurrence of each number, meaning that every number in that list is unique. And the reason we would use .remove in this position, or in this situation, is because what .remove does is that it just removes the first occurrence. So if my list looked a little something like this, right? My list looked a little something like this, and I was trying to remove the element 4, it wouldn't remove both of them, or it wouldn't remove the second one, it would remove the first occurrence. So what it's going to do is just going to go through the list one by one and look for the first occurrence. And when it sees that first occurrence, it's going to remove it. So in the end, we're going to end up with 1, 2, 3, 4. And another reason why I would use .remove is, again, when we're using unique items. But the other way we can remove things is by using .pop. So what .pop does is that instead of putting a value inside of this, right, we can put an index or a position. So if we think back to our 0 indexing method where the first position is actually 0 instead of 1, we can use the same .pop method to remove using the element's position. So if I wanted to, again, remove 4, right, what is the position of 4? It's 3. Again, because this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So we would do .pop of 3. And that's going to remove the item at my third position, which is 4. If I leave .pop as empty, it's going to remove the last thing in our list. So it's kind of just reversing the .append method. Make sense? So if when we do .pop on an empty, if we just put nothing inside the brackets, it's just going to reverse the .append. It's going to remove what's at the end. And we're going to put this to action. Okay? So if I wanted to remove my 1, let's say I want to remove 1, right? I would do numbers .remove of 1. Okay? I'm going to print this. I'm running Java. See? So you see that it removes our first occurrence of it. And if I put another 1 over here, I'm going to run this program again. See this? It removes the first occurrence of 1 over here. And the reason the 5's over here is because I added the 5 later on. But that's not a big deal. So what we have to remember is that .remove removes the first occurrence of an element in our list. If I did .pop, right? If I did .pop of, let's say over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, right? If I wanted to remove the last one over here, what I can just do is .pop of 4. See that? It's going to remove my fourth element. Well, actually, I'm going to remove this so it's easier to understand. I'm going to comment this out. So yeah. See this? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's removing, or it's popping out the last element from my stack of papers. It's a good analogy to think about. Right? Just remember, a list is a stack of papers. There's another situation and another data type similar to a list where it's also called a stack, and it's pretty similar to the stack of papers thing, or a stack of pancakes. Right? So we can think of our list as a stack of paper, and we're just removing or putting things on top. So a .empty .pop, what it's going to do is it's going to remove the last thing. So it's going to remove this 1 over here. Same function as before. There. It's going to remove that 1. Okay? So that's what .pop and .remove do. The differentiation between the both is that .remove removes the thing based off its value and its occurrence. So .remove removes the first occurrence of a value, whereas .pop either removes the last element in the list or it removes based off the position or index you give it. So for the final thing in this video, we're going to learn about how to find out the length of lists. Okay? So let's say I had a really long list of bank details. I didn't want to go through all of them one by one, counting them. So I just want to find an efficient way, an easy way to find the length of these bank details or this list. So here's how we would do it. Okay. So we would do something called a len method. So len, and inside these brackets, I would do print firstly. Do print, and then len of my variable name. Okay. So len of numbers. This should give us the length of our list, 4. If we look at our most recent array, it has a length of 4 because 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? And the length of it is 4. Pretty easy to understand. So what did we learn in this video? We learned how to create lists, what they are. Here's a little review. Lists are just a container that can store data. And when we define lists, we define them with square brackets, and we don't have to define the data type. We can add items using comma separated values to our list, or we can also use dot append. There's 2 ways to remove things from lists. The first way is dot remove, which removes the first occurrence of that value, and dot pop. Dot pop, an empty dot pop, is just removing the last element, whereas a dot pop with a value inside of it is going to remove that element at that index. And then finally, we can find the length of lists using len of the variable name, which holds lists. So that is arrays and lists. Quick intro to them. In the next video, we're going to go a bit more in depth, more operations, and how we can actually use lists for real things in the real world. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.